Welcome to AI Innovators Interview Series with special guest Glenn Hopper. My name is Neil Brown, Executive Director of the AI Leaders Council, and today I'd like to introduce you to our AI innovator, Glenn Hopper, who's Managing Director and Head of AI for VAI Consulting, and which serves the finance and accounting sectors and others. Glenn is a former CFO and he's also the author of the Amazon best-selling book Deep Finance: Corporate Finance in the Information Age. His new book, AI Mastery for Finance Professionals, is also available on Amazon and other retailers. Glenn serves on advisory boards, including the University of Memphis School of Accountancy and Prequel, an AI data platform for finance. He's an instructor in the executive education program at Duke University. It's actually a CFO program. And Glenn earned a Master of Liberal Arts from Harvard University, a graduate certificate in business analytics from Harvard Business School, and a Gen AI plus finance certification from Digital Design Institute at Harvard, and several other degrees as well. So, with that, I'd like to welcome you, Glenn, and thank you for participating.
Yeah, Neil, thanks for having me. It's been a minute since we talked, so happy to be joining you again.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Glenn and I have done several panels in the past before, and he's always been excellent. So let's get to these questions. The first one is, Glenn, I know you mentioned to me that you've been training with groups on AI in Southeast Asia and Latin America and flying all over the world, but give us an overview of VAI consulting and about your background and that kind of thing.
Sure. So starting with Vi, it's a boutique consulting firm. I guess the best way to say what we do, we're focused on, it's funny, I used to say digital transformation, but we've been talking about digital transformation for 30 years. So I think if you say transformation, people assume it's a one and done. So I'm calling it now digital evolution instead of transformation. It's an ongoing process. It never
Okay.
stops. And it's increasingly difficult and increasingly more imperative. So VI's focused on that digital evolution, primarily for finance, but also on the operations side. And I lead the practice. I lead the AI practice there. I'm the managing director over that, and we're really talking to firms every day about primarily generative AI. But it's funny, generative AI right now. It's like the shiny lure, the fishing lure that draws people in. But a lot of times, especially in finance and accounting, there's a part for generative AI, but really deterministic, old-fashioned machine learning, we'll call it classic AI, is more of a solution. And we put a generative AI layer so that it makes the data easier to work with for people who aren't writing Python or SQL queries or whatever the case is. So, I mean, the whole idea is we do uh, projects. And the interesting thing right now, while we have many implementation projects in the pipeline, there's such a gap right now between all the hype that people are hearing and what they understand about the technology. So we're having to step back and really focus on a lot more training. So, like you mentioned, I've been traveling around the world doing training, but I think when you hear about a lot of these projects that are failing and not going anywhere, it's not a fault of the technology. It's sort of someone has to come in and help translate the technology into the business domain language and vice versa. So that's really where we're finding a lot of work right now. It's maybe not as exciting as doing the big projects, but it's a necessary step and one that we're happy to do.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really neat perspective, but accurate. I think you're going to delve deeper into that shortly. Well, let's move on. You started as a U.S. Navy Public Affairs officer. Thank you for your service, Glenn. Then many CFO roles. You're teaching at Duke. How did this prepare you to be a subject matter expert on AI?
Was a circuitous path towards AI, but that said, I guess my when I was in the Navy, I think the one of the first I was at a edited a monthly news magazine at a Naval Technical Training Center in Pensacola, Florida in 1995. And this was the dawn of the internet. And so, yes, I was working in journalism for the Navy, but this was the time we were moving from print online and we were moving from film to digital for photos. And really, I think of all the points in my career where technology has been, and I've just been an early adopter, whether it was the days in the Navy or when I was in telecom, managing products before I got into finance. And just making use of technology. And I think because I'm kind of a wannabe coder, we'll say citizen developer, and I've always been interested in the computer science side, not as my primary role, but as something that supports my role. And because I love statistics and math, sort of riding the data science wave and the BI wave and understanding what we could do with data and even before machine learning, using statistical modeling to get better forecasts. It's for me, I guess I would say necessity is the mother of invention. So when I was a CFO, I was working with the same investment group, and I would be put into companies that were a lot of them, not necessarily a full turnaround, but maybe they were private equity companies that were a little long in the tooth. They had been invested for 5 or 6 years and were kind of flat, and we needed to come in and do something to improve EBITDA, get them ready for sale or for raising money or whatever the case was. But that always meant I had limited resources, so I had to lean into technology early, and because I had private equity invested in these companies and you know how the reports they want, I had to be a great uh, report writer and storyteller about the financials. And everything just seemed natural merging with technology for me. And so during COVID, I wrote a book, Deep Finance, about using machine learning in finance. And back then, it was a very niche book, and there's a very small targeted audience. But that was 2021, and lo and behold, a couple of years later, generative AI comes along, and everybody in the world is talking about it. So I've kind of just ridden that wave.
Wow, neat. Yeah, that's a great, some great storytelling. Well, let's talk about your books. Your first book, AI Mastery for, I'm sorry. Uh, let's talk about. Oh, we mentioned your prior book. Let's talk about your new book, AI Mastery for Financial Professionals. What's the premise? What are the key takeaways? How is the book different from your earlier book, Deep Finance?
Yeah. So, in a lot of ways, AI Mastery is the book that I wanted to write when I wrote Deep Finance. But I think I was just too far ahead of the
Yeah,
curve
too
that,
early. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that the publishers just, it was, I mean, so AI Mastery is really, there's not a lot of anecdotes in there. There are case studies. It is a textbook. And I guess my thinking with AI Mastery is people don't care about my story. They want to understand this technology. And I want to throw out there, even though this came out, after generative AI was out, the book's not really about generative AI. Certainly we touch on it, but what I do in AI mastery is exactly what I'm doing with clients right now. It is, let's understand the underlying technology first. And then once we understand the underlying technology, I'm not saying I'm trying to turn you into a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, but you need to have a basic working concept of how this works. Because if you don't have that fundamental level of understanding, no matter what domain expertise you're not going to know how to apply the technology. And you might as well, if you don't understand how it's generating answers, you might as well ask that magic 8 ball and shake it up and and see what answer comes out. And you're not going to trust it if you don't understand it. So I may be naturally pedantic, but I really believe that it's incumbent on all of us to learn the technology. So the book starts out, that's the foundation. Let's talk about what AI and what machine learning are. And then I go through every area of finance and accounting that I could think of, from corporate finance and accounting to high finance to investments, and go through and give practical examples of how AI could be used in each of those. And then I go through and talk about how to implement AI programs. And really, it's meant to be it's not a light read. It's meant to be a comprehensive guidebook that by the time you finish it, you understand the technology, have plenty of use cases of where you could apply it in your business, and a roadmap for how you do it.
Well, that's neat because I think there's often a dearth of use cases, isn't there?
They really are. And I think it's because so many people, if you just think about, well, what can I upload into Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude? Um, it feels it can do some amazing things. It can also hallucinate and give you bad responses, but it's if you're just thinking about AI as you interact with it through a web browser, it's going to seem kind of limiting. But when you think about where the true innovations are going to come, that is in integrating across systems. And I think once you understand that, then the use cases become much more vast.
Yeah, I had to write that down. That was really good. Okay. Let's move on to our next question. A recent MIT study finds 95% of Gen AI pilots fail. What is your perspective on this? Is this what you're seeing in the
I
market?
mean, so that study, and I could the way that it was presented in the press and what the study said and sort of the rigor around the study, not to knock MIT's rigor, but it was the press, as they often do, sort of took it and ran with it, and had their own narrative around it. And I guess what I want to say around that, I keep going back to the Gartner hype cycle. And so first off, I do see a lot of failed pilots, but I want to throw the caveat: the pilots aren't failing because the technology is bad or not working. Pilots are failing because there's a lack of understanding of how it works, where to use it, what its strengths are, and what its limitations are. So, what I'm starting to realize now, just yesterday, and I'm kind of obsessed on this, so I apologize. I'm going to go off on a tangent here with the story. But okay, picture the Gartner hype cycle. You get the technology trigger, you ride that wave up to peak of inflated expectations. I think right now, Gartner hasn't come out and said this, but talking to the clients I do and people in business, we have people going over the edge. We're over the peak of inflated expectations, and they're just plummeting down towards the trough of disillusionment. And it's not because of, again, it's not because of the technology, it's because there's so much noise and so many false promises and so much of a lack of understanding around how to use it, that people are just getting frustrated. And especially in finance and accounting, we're naturally risk averse people. So we're all, there's a tendency kind of across the board now to put on the brakes and say, you know what? I don't want to have what happened to Deloitte happen to me, and I can't handle the reputational risk of putting out some AI slop and not checking it. So there's guardrails, there's ways around that. But I guess the insight that I just had this week, and this is not original, and I just hadn't seen this before, but someone showed me a graph that had the Gartner hype cycle overlaid with the adoption cycle of a new technology. And I just pictured, before I thought of it this way, I pictured, okay, we're riding that wave up on the Gartner hype cycle, and you've got your innovators and your early adopters. And as you get towards the top, the early majority even is coming in there. Um, but that's not the way technology works. If you look back at cloud computing, at SaaS, at on-prem versus cloud, look at phones, internet, any technology, big technology you can think of, as you ride that up, yeah, you get the innovators out on the front edge of that wave that are riding it up to the top, and they're making use of it. And then maybe you start to get some early adopters as we hit that peak of inflated expectation where they're feeling the pressure and they come in and do it. But really, what happens is once that hype starts to fall, there's this chasm where nobody wants to do anything with it. The technology kind of moves forward, people understand it better, the software gets better, and then you get that wave of early adopters. And then once this hype cycle starts to come out of that trough of disillusionment, and you are seeing those numbers start to change, like from the MIT study, then you get the early majority and you kind of move through it. So I think really, just because I spend so much time in it, I've maybe spent the last 2 years thinking that businesses were going to unnaturally jump on this technology. And now I'm realizing that's just not the way that it works.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good insight. Thank you for that. So, and with that backdrop, how should organizations measure AI success? What are some of the top use cases or impacts that you've seen? Are there KPIs for AI that you'd recommend?
Yeah. So the first step is to think of generative AI rolling out in two ways. One is the top down. This is where your big capital investments, this is integrating into your systems and making it part of the company's overall workflow. And we'll put a pin in that and come back to it because what we're actually seeing right now, even though maybe on that top down level, we're seeing people and companies fall into that trough of disillusionment, on the bottom up level is when you give your employees access to the tools, you give them training, you give them guardrails, you give them understanding of how they work and what their strengths and limitations are, what data can go in there, under what circumstances, you are starting to see some real micro wins. And it's funny the way you think about these. So if you ask me for ROI on this bottom up version, I would say, well, we're talking about a software expense first off. So, um, you know, what's your ROI on investing in, whatever, any SaaS tool you use, whether it's your ERP, CRM, whatever. It's part of the work. And these micro wins we're seeing is employees are getting more productive at the individual level. Now, what they do with that extra time, I don't know. That's depending on culture and how it's set up and if they're set up for success. But what that means is if employees are figuring out on their own ways to become more productive, then they can shift their time from those mindless tasks to doing more mindful and more valuable work. Like nobody goes and gets a master's in accounting because they love data entry. It's what is that higher order of work that you can do? And as much as you can automate on that, and who loves doing reconciliations, right? Like, so if you can automate that and free yourself up for those real value adds, I think there's going to be more job satisfaction. There's more expansion of the job, and finance and accounting gets even more of a way to move out of that idea that we're just a cost center that supports the business. We can actually think more strategically and be more strategic. On the top down, right? I think the technology is moving quickly. I think in the next, let's say, minimum 2 years, say 2 to 5 years, you're going to start seeing big players have meaningful solutions that are AI driven. So you could have an off the shelf product. In the interim, you have these innovators and early adopters who understand the technology and are rolling out these projects where they're doing things that make not just individual contributors' jobs easier, but whole workflows jobs easier. So it's like in a lot of ways, there's a temptation here to tie AI gains to automation, efficiency, and reducing headcount. And I do think that there are some jobs that will be at risk, just like with any automation and new technology. However, the new roles and potential it opens up will be a lot different. But that's a whole different tangent. I think on the top down for measuring ROI, it's you think of it the same way that you do investing in data governance, analytics, business intelligence. You are moving your company from hunch to hypothesis, and you are empowering. We've had the democratization of data for some time for the companies that have truly become mature in their data realm. But with generative AI, you actually have democratization of data science where people can not just see the data, but they can talk to it, ask it questions, and get more insights out of it. So, yeah, I mean, this is in the book, and I write about it a lot. And I'm a former CFO, so I'm not discounting ROI at all, obviously, because if anybody brought a project to me, I would, that's one of the first questions I would ask. But I think you have to look beyond short-term wins here. This is an evolutionary process, and this would be not investing in it now would be like, we're not going to invest in going online. We're not going to invest in cloud computing or, whatever the other technological wave has come before. So there are going to be expenses for doing it, but I think those are going to be greatly offset by the expense down the road of not preparing for it now and making the investment now.
Yeah. In one of our recent other interviews, uh, the our subject matter expert mentioned that they're getting 98% usage of the tools that the licenses of this happened to be Microsoft Copilot that were being deployed. So usage, it's not a financial ROI, but it's being used a lot, and
Yeah.
people are making.
On
Go
the
ahead.
flip side of that, I've talked to organizations that have rolled out 500 licenses of OpenAI ChatGPT Enterprise and are getting very low usage, but that's because the rollout was just throw it across the fence and see what happens. It wasn't a structured and smart way to roll it out. And so there was a lot of confusion among the employees of everything I said before of like, what can I use this for? When can I not use it? What am I allowed to do with it? How do I treat the results and everything? So it's it it comes down to in a lot of ways human psychology and change management and just good leadership. Just throwing some new tool out there with no training or explanation of how to use it or how it works. Well, you're gonna get what you invested in it.
And you mentioned, and I really love the terms top down and bottom up, and that the bottom up is really employees getting the tools, getting the training, getting guardrails, etc. So that's a really nice way to explain it. So thank you for that. So let's move on to question 6. What have you learned about leading or implementing AI initiatives that might help other executives and innovators?
Yeah, I've got a framework around this, and I'll quickly go through it, and then I'll talk about my approach to project management in general, which applies to rolling out AI projects as well. So, I think for companies, it has to start at the executive level, and it can't be, well, my expertise is in sales and marketing. My expertise is in operations or engineering or finance or whatever it is. I don't care what role you're in. You have to, and this is, I'm going to keep beating this drum. You have to understand this technology, and it's different than I don't need to understand how this microphone works, how this monitor works, how my keyboard works. Those are all passive pass through media that are just I'm operating through. AI is different because even compared to a calculator, because it just responds in different ways and it reacts in different ways, and we have the potential to offload so much to it. So I don't care if you're an executive or a fresh college graduate, no matter what you're studying, you have to understand the technology. So for these to be successful, I think it starts at the top with making sure that leadership has a thorough understanding of the technology, what it is, what it does, what its limitations are. Then the leadership comes up with the guardrails. What are they comfortable with? How are we going to use this? Where are we not allowed to use it? Where we could have compliance and regulatory issues of times that we can and can't use it. But I work with defense contractors too. And there's a great deal of data that they couldn't possibly put into a cloud-based LLM, but there are on-prem LLMs you can run smaller models. There's also other data that is not sensitive that could be used in an LLM. And then there's anyway, I don't want to get on my high horse about type 2 or SOC 2 type 2 compliance and that ultimately with the right settings in place, uploading data into one of these models is no different than uploading data to AWS, S3 or your ERP or CRM or any cloud-based software. So that's a whole other thing. But so executive team understands it, you put guardrails in place, and then you train your employees how to use it, what it is, and then you have a group of evangelists that you train even more that are people who are going to opt in, and every company's got them, people who are interested in this stuff and want to learn more. You train them, and then once you get sort of everybody understanding the technology, trained on it, using it, seeing these small wins, you pick a couple of small pilot projects and you say we're not, and you pick them based on a matrix of uh how often are they done. So I would say frequency, complexity, and then risk. And risk has to be considered. You don't want to, just like you wouldn't give your biggest project to the summer intern or to a new junior analyst, you're not going to start with the big massive project. Start with a small project and find some areas where you can have quick wins that are low risk. And then that helps that with that change management side, you're building productivity and efficiency, but you're also building trust among the team. So that's all the framework. And I think that one thing to keep in mind with when you're selecting projects, um, yes, complexity and risk factor in, but also I'm an agile guy from days in software development, and I've just adopted that as overall project management. I think find those quick wins, find small projects. Don't try to eat the elephant all at once and just find these small projects that are going to be quick wins. And the more you get buy-in and the more you get understanding, then you're going to be able to take on those bigger projects. And then when you've shifted the culture, those numbers that we saw in the MIT report and others, those start to completely change because it's a completely different environment.
Wow. Yeah, well spoken on that one. Well, let's get to our last question. What do you see as the most important opportunities or challenges for AI in business over the next few years? I think you
Yeah,
touched on some of this, but yes.
yeah, I predicted early this year that 2025 was going to be the year of the agent. And certainly if you listen to software companies or marketers and the press at times, you might think that's the case, but truthfully, for a true agent, we're not there. There's agentic workflows and there's all kinds of automations, but the word has been bandied about in ways that aren't reflective of what a true agent is. And I think that lack of misunderstanding has led to what is to a lot of failures that we've seen in these projects. I would say though, the the technology of a truly agentic piece of software that you give a task to and it doesn't follow an orchestrated. Right now, we're doing all kinds of agentic workflows that have rule-based steps where there's decision points that are determined by rules. We sprinkle in AI where it can help, but we limit the risk out of that. And so to the end user, if it looks like an agent, fine, maybe we'd do better to market it as an agent. But I can't cross that semantic bridge to we can build you an automation, an agentic workflow that is AI powered or AI boosted. But I'm not going to sell it as an agent that you're just talking to as you would a robot from Star Trek or whatever. But I do think it's coming and it's coming quickly. The technology is moving so fast. But I think agentic workflows and truly agentic software is coming. I think we're moving ever closer to that sort of real-time close, that real-time planning where we're linking drivers, scenarios, narrative reporting, and it's all being done in the background and fed to you. It's sort of think of it as dashboarding 2.0. This is another level of dashboarding and dashboarding at the level where when you see something, yeah, right now you can click in your ERP and drill down, however many levels. But if you want to do some kind of custom report, normally you're going off to IT and requesting the report or to the data science group, whatever it is in your company. And we're going to have this new level of being able to interact with our data. Um, and I think that the
Like all
whole
those screens you see where they're using their finger to just
yes, yeah. Yeah, true Star Trek or Minority Report level technology. I don't know how far that is, but it's really um I I think that this is just going to be an extension of what we've seen with the use of machine learning and data science for the last decade. It's just going to be more in our face, and it's going to be, we don't even think anymore about when Netflix recommends a movie, what the algorithm is that drives that. But remember, 25 years ago or whenever it was, there was $1 million prize for whoever could write the best algorithm to recommend a movie. But whether it's Netflix or Amazon recommending your next product you're going to buy based on your history, or whatever we're getting from social media that is tailored exactly to our habits and interests. I mean, it's just going to be a further expansion of that. And it's going to be, I think, more seamless because the nature of generative AI, the ability for it to communicate in such a human way, it is going to make it start feeling like, you're working with the robots from Star Trek or whatever.
So is that, are you moving your 2025 year of the agent to 2026 or 20?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's reasonable. And I don't know, maybe arguably in a lot of ways we are there. Certainly if you listen to people like Mark Benioff and there are plenty preaching about the power of agents. And I completely agree with them. I haven't seen a truly agentic process that works without some scaffolding and other structural setups. But I do think we're moving there. And again, every time it looks like we've hit some kind of wall, and what these models can do, some new technology breakthrough just knocks that wall down, and we keep moving forward. So I do think, while I might have missed in 2025, I feel like we're going to get there where I'll have to say, okay, I'll concede 2026 is the year of the age.
All
Yeah.
right, we have that in writing. 20, this will come out as little sound bites.
Yeah.
2026, the year. Other sound bites, dashboarding 2.0, the bottom up. So, wow, Glenn, thanks for sharing your expertise today. And I don't know why we're not going to the thank you slide here, but um, there we go. Glenn, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise and these extraordinary insights, really. And we'll have this video live at this domain here, aileaderscouncil.org/AI Innovators. And thank you again, Glenn, and look forward to our future collaboration and safe travels as you fly all around the world.
Happy to be here, Neil. Pleasure as always.
Take care. Thank you.